My mom said I didn't deserve Grandma's house. Hi, my name is Sarah Chen. I'm 28 years old, and I work as a financial analyst in Boston. 3 months ago, my mother told me I didn't deserve my grandmother's house. Last week, I watched her face crumble when she realized what that statement cost her. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you how my family tried to steal my inheritance and how I made sure they got exactly what they deserved. My grandmother Eleanor raised me. That's the truth nobody in my family wants to acknowledge. When I was 7, my parents decided my older brother Marcus needed their full attention because he was gifted. That's what Mom called it. What it actually meant was that Marcus was failing school despite being smart, partying too much, and needed constant supervision. So they shipped me off to Grandma's house in Providence for what they said would be a few months. I stayed there for 11 years. Grandma never made me feel like a burden. She came to every school play, every parent-teacher conference, every swim meet. She taught me to cook, helped me with college applications, and stayed up late talking about everything from boys to career choices. When I got into Boston University with a full academic scholarship, she cried happy tears. My parents sent a text saying, "Congrats." Meanwhile, Marcus flunked out of 2 colleges, got a DUI, and moved back in with my parents at 25. They paid for everything. His lawyer fees, his credit card debt, even his gym membership. Mom would call me occasionally, usually to borrow money or ask why I couldn't be more supportive of my brother's journey of self-discovery. I stopped answering after a while. Grandma got sick last year. Pancreatic cancer. She didn't tell anyone for 3 months because she didn't want to worry us. When she finally called me, her voice was so calm it broke my heart. I drove to Providence that same day, walked into her sunny kitchen, and held her while she cried. That was the first time I'd seen her vulnerable. I took family medical leave from work. For 6 months, I was there every single day. I drove her to chemo appointments, held her hair when she threw up, managed her medications, cooked meals she could actually stomach, and sat with her through the long, scary nights. I read to her, we watched old movies, and we talked about everything. She told me stories about my grandfather, about her own mother, about the house that had been in our family for 3 generations. My parents visited twice. Once for an afternoon when she was first diagnosed, and once 3 days before she died. Marcus never came at all. Mom spent most of that final visit talking about how stressed she was planning Marcus's wedding. Yes, his wedding. My perpetually unemployed 30-year-old brother was marrying a girl he'd known for 4 months, and Mom was spending thousands on it. The day before Grandma died, she held my hand with surprising strength. "Sarah," she whispered, "I need to tell you something important. My will, my lawyer has it, Harold Brennan. Everything goes to you. The house, my savings, all of it. You earned it, sweetheart. You are here." "Grandma, don't talk like that. Listen to me." Her eyes were fierce despite her frailty. "Your mother is going to fight this. I know, my daughter. But you stand firm. That house is yours. Promise me you won't let them bully you." I promised. She died peacefully that night with her head on my shoulder. The funeral was a performance. Mom sobbed dramatically, telling everyone how close she and Mama had been, how much she'd missed their daily phone calls. I bit my tongue so hard I tasted blood. Marcus showed up hungover in a wrinkled suit. Dad looked uncomfortable, like he always did during family drama. The real drama started the next week at the lawyer's office. Harold Brennan was a distinguished man in his 60s who'd known Grandma for 40 years. He read the will in his quiet office while my parents sat across from me. "To my beloved granddaughter Sarah Chen, who has been my true companion and caretaker, I leave my entire estate. This includes my home at 247 Maple Street, Providence, all financial accounts, personal belongings, and my grandmother's jewelry collection. Sarah earned this through her love, dedication, and presence in my life." The silence was deafening. Then Mom exploded. "This is ridiculous. That house has been in our family for generations. It should come to me. I'm her daughter." "Mrs. Chen," Harold said calmly, "your mother was very clear about her wishes. She was sick, confused, probably heavily medicated. I assure you, Eleanor was completely lucid when she updated this will 6 months ago. She even anticipated concerns about her mental state and had 2 doctors certify her competency. My mother's face turned an ugly shade of red.
She whirled on me.
You manipulated her. You isolated her from her real family and poisoned her against us. I felt something cold settle in my chest. I was there, Mom. Where were you? Don't you dare. I had responsibilities. Your brother needed me. Marcus is 30 years old. And you're so perfect, aren't you? She stood up, pointing at me. You always were Mama's little pet. But that house is worth over $800,000, Sarah. You don't deserve it. You didn't earn it. We're going to fight this. That's when I realized. She didn't care about losing her mother. She cared about losing money. You're welcome to try, I said quietly. But Grandma's will is airtight. Mr. Brennan made sure of it. They stormed out. Dad wouldn't meet my eyes. For 3 weeks, I dealt with their harassment. Mom called me 20 times a day, alternating between tearful guilt trips and screaming accusations. Marcus sent me threatening texts about how I owed him because family takes care of family. Dad sent one email asking me to be reasonable and consider splitting things fairly. The nerve. They wanted me to split Grandma's estate with them when they'd barely visited her. When they'd left me to handle everything alone. When they'd spent decades making me feel like the least important person in the family. But I stayed calm. Because during one of those late-night talks in the hospital, Grandma had told me something else. Something she discovered by accident about 2 years earlier when Marcus had drunkenly confessed during a family dinner I hadn't attended. My parents had borrowed $60,000 from Grandma 8 years ago. They told her it was for emergency medical expenses. It was actually to pay off Marcus's gambling debts. They'd promised to pay her back within 2 years. They never paid back a single cent. When she gently asked about it once, Mom had cried and said they were going through a hard time and she couldn't believe her own mother would harass her about money. Grandma had documentation. Emails, bank transfers, even a handwritten IOU from Dad. She'd shown me everything and told me, I want you to know the truth about who they are, just in case you ever doubt yourself when they come after you. I went back to Harold's office alone. I need to know something. Does their borrowing money from Grandma affect the estate in any way? He looked at me carefully. Legally, that debt passes to you as the inheritor of her estate. You could technically demand repayment, though family debts are complicated to collect on. What if I don't want to collect? What if I just want them to know that I know? He smiled slightly. That's between you and your family. But if they're threatening to contest the will, you should know that any legal challenge would involve full financial discovery. All transactions between your grandmother and your parents would become part of the public record.
Perfect.
Mom filed a will contest 2 days later. She claimed undue influence and diminished capacity. I wasn't worried, but I did do something that made me feel powerful for the first time in years. I had Harold send my parents a letter. It detailed the $60,000 debt, included copies of all documentation, and politely requested they drop the will contest, or we would be forced to counterclaim for the unpaid loan plus interest. The letter was perfectly legal and professional. Mom called me at midnight, screaming incoherently. When she finally calmed down enough to form words, she hissed, "You have no proof we borrowed that money." Actually, I have all the proof. Bank transfers, emails, your signature on an IOU. Would you like me to submit it to the probate court? Because I will. You're bluffing. Try me. Also, Mom, when you contest the will, the court requires full financial disclosure. That means everyone will see how much money you borrowed from Grandma while claiming you couldn't afford to visit her. Everyone will see how you spent it. I wonder what Marcus's fiancée will think when she finds out about his gambling problem. The silence on the other end told me everything. Drop the contest, I said, and we never speak of this again. Keep pushing, and I'll make sure everyone knows exactly who you are. She dropped it the next day. But I wasn't done. Because here's what else I'd learned from Grandma's papers. My parents had been telling their friends, our relatives, everyone, that they were supporting me financially, that I was struggling and they were helping me get on my feet. Multiple relatives had mentioned this to Grandma over the years, praising my parents for their generosity. It was completely false. I'd been financially independent since graduation. I'd paid off my own student loans, bought my own car, funded my own retirement account. I'd never asked them for a cent. But they'd been dining out on the story of their charity for years. So I sent a letter. Not a legal one, just a personal one. I sent it to every relative, every family friend, every person in our extended circle. I wrote the truth calmly and factually. I explained that I'd lived with Grandma by choice and necessity from age 7 onwards. That I'd been her primary caretaker during her illness. That my parents had borrowed money from her they never repaid. That they hadn't supported me financially since I was a child, despite claiming otherwise. That I was hurt by their false narrative and needed to set the record straight. I didn't exaggerate. I didn't embellish. I just told the truth. The response was overwhelming. Aunts and uncles I barely knew reached out with apologies and support. Cousins sent messages saying they'd always suspected something was off. Even some of my parents' friends quietly stopped associating with them. Marcus's wedding got canceled. His fiancée called it off when she learned about the gambling, the debts, and the lies. Mom was devastated, not because Marcus was hurt, but because she'd lost the wedding she'd been planning. The final piece fell into place 6 weeks ago. I was cleaning out Grandma's house, preparing to move in, when I found her journals. 20 years of daily entries. I spent a whole weekend reading them, crying and laughing in equal measure. She'd written about everything. About how hard it was to watch her daughter prioritize Marcus, while neglecting me. About the day she decided to update her will. About her pride in my accomplishments. About her disappointment in my parents' choices. But the most revealing entry was from 8 years ago, right after she'd given them the $60,000. She'd written, "I know they won't pay me back. I'm not naive. But I'm documenting everything because someday, if they try to take from Sarah what she's earned, she'll need proof of who they really are. My brilliant, kind granddaughter deserves better than them." She'd been protecting me even then. I moved into the house last month. It's beautiful and full of memories. I got a promotion at work and a significant raise. I can easily afford the property taxes and maintenance. I'm dating someone wonderful who thinks it's impressive that I cared for my grandmother and admirable that I stood up to my family. My parents tried to show up at the house 2 weeks ago. I'd changed the locks, of course. They stood on the porch yelling while I watched through the window. Finally, I opened the door and said calmly, "This is private property. You're not welcome here. Leave or I'll call the police." My mother's face crumpled. "Sarah, please. I'm your mother. We made mistakes, but we're still family." I looked at her, really looked at her, and felt nothing but pity. "You made your choices, Mom. You chose Marcus over me for 20 years. You chose to lie and manipulate and steal. You chose to contest Grandma's will instead of respecting her wishes. Those were all your choices. Now I'm making mine. I choose peace. That means you stay out of my life." "You can't mean that." "I do."
Goodbye, Mom.
I closed the door. I heard her crying on the porch, heard Dad trying to calm her down, heard them eventually leave. I felt lighter than I had in years. Now, 3 months after Grandma's death, I'm thriving. The house is mine, legally and emotionally. I've started hosting dinners for friends, the kind of warm, loving gatherings Grandma used to have. I'm taking care of her garden, reading her books, living in her space with gratitude and joy. Sometimes I still get angry. Sometimes I cry over the childhood I should have had, the parents I deserved but never got. But mostly I feel grateful. Grateful for Grandma, for her love and wisdom and foresight. Grateful that she taught me to stand up for myself. Grateful that she gave me the tools to protect what was rightfully mine. My parents lost more than an inheritance. They lost their daughter, their reputation, and their carefully constructed image. They lost because of their own choices, their own lies, their own greed. I won because I showed up, because I loved someone unconditionally, because I told the truth. Grandma was right. I did deserve this house, and I'm going to fill it with love, just like she did.